All right. Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome to Mazske Finance. And once again, we're going to have another great interview. And actually, this one is not an interview. This is a three-way discussion. We have two counterparts here with a lot of experience in real estate. And those two are, we'll start off with, we'll go kind of in YouTube order. We got the famous Millennial Mike here. So go ahead, Mike.
It's not yet. Thanks for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it. Good to see both you and Dominic, obviously, but please, definitely not famous.
All right, sounds good. Well, we got we'll say the soon to be famous Dominic Kosteris here. So say hello, Dom.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. All right. Well, thanks to both of you for appearing on my channel. And just FYI, folks, we're going to do this periodically. And what we'll do is maybe I'll host it this time. Millennial Mike may host it, and Dominic may host on his channel one time. So make sure you tune into all three channels, and I will put the links to each channel in the description below. All right. So to kick it off, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about real estate. And we're going to talk about, you've heard real estate investors mention cash reserves. So it's like, what are cash reserves? How much do we need in cash reserves? All right, so to kick it off, how about we start off with Dom? Dom, just give us your take on cash reserves and tell us real quick about how many rentals you have and then kind of lead that into cash reserves.
When I first got into this business, someone advised me saying you have to have money in reserves because there's always that unexpected repair, which could be very costly. I had two furnace calls yesterday. Okay. One turned out to be a nothing burger, but there have been times where I've gotten some, a roof leak. I've gotten in 1 month, 3 or 4 furnace. You have to have money in reserves. That's one of the first pieces of advice someone gave me. Back in the late 90s when I got into this, it's sound advice. If someone has 1, 2, or 3 properties, I would advise them to have maybe a few $1,000s in reserve, maybe $10,000 in reserves, just in case if that unexpected catastrophe occurs. Under no circumstance should a tenant be left without basic amenities because you may be on a shoestring. That's you can be sued for something like that. That's a surefire way to lose a tenant. So you have to have that in reserves. And I made sure to follow that sound advice when I first got started. So I'm not left, not left broke and telling the tenant, hey, I get paid the first of the month. I'll be sure to have your heat fixed or your pipe fixed or what have you. Cash reserve is very, very important. And if Dave Ramsey's watching this, he may drop dead of a heart attack. I would have I would advocate credit cards. Just in case if you run out of your cash reserves, you need those credit cards. Just in case if something exceeds your cash reserves. If you're risky and you say, I'm just going to go strictly on credit cards and not use any cash, hey, whatever. But under no circumstances should you skimp out or deny your tenants basic services when the need arises.
All right, that sounds good to me, Dom, and I agree with everything you're saying. And one thing, when I started out, I was still working full time, and I knew I had to have reserves, but I had money in the bank and I had a paycheck coming in, and my kids were grown, so I wasn't as concerned about it because my paycheck could cover it. However, I'm now retired, living off my investments. So as I was smaller, and I agree with what Dom said, if you're just starting out, you got 1, 2, or 3 rentals. If you have 5 to 10 to 12 to 15,000 in reserves, that's probably good enough. As you grow larger and get more rentals, and I went through a thought process, how do I want to do this? Do I want $5,000 per rental house? Do I want $10,000 per rental house? If I did 10,000, by the time I get 10 rentals, that's $100,000. That's a big chunk of money. If I do 5,000, get 10 rentals, that could be $50,000. Again, that's a substantial chunk of money. So kind of what I did as my rental portfolio grew, my cash reserves grew along with it, but at a kind of at a slower pace. Once I got up to 20, that's where I realized, all right, I need to be prepared for something big if something big happens. And I'll give you an example. I bought 9 houses from a gentleman using seller financing. All 9 I knew needed work. And when the first tenant moved out, a rehab cost $11,500. At the same time, I had another house in a different state. I had to pay something like $5,000. And then I had $2,500 in a different house. And I realized then it's like, wait a second, that $50,000, if I get back-to-back rehabs and a bad roof on a third house, that could take a good part of that 50 grand. So for me personally, I have a goal of getting it up close to 6 figures and putting it away somewhere safe. Somewhere safe meaning I'm not going to spend it on stuff. I may spend it. My weakness is as I build that cash, I may decide to buy another rental house or to make another investment. So the cash drops down. But on the flip side, if it's another rental house, there's more cash coming in. So it's kind of a balancing situation, for myself. So anyway, I'll throw it over to Mike. Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
So, obviously, I agree with a large majority of what you guys have said. And for the people out there who are watching this, Dominic has over 50 rental properties. Mark has around 25, and I have 6. And so, for the newer investor who maybe has this question, and when we were brainstorming topics, I was the one who was like, I kind of want to talk about cash reserves, because as both Mark and Dom have just said, there's that beginning stage where you have maybe 3 or 4 properties where you can get away with what I've been doing of having about $5,000 to $10,000 in cash reserves. But I'm looking to now go from 6 properties to hopefully 15, which would put me closer to Caleb, and then hopefully, to 25, and then maybe one day get up to where Dom is. And so my question,
I'll have 100.
Well, I'll never catch you. I'll just be on your tails. But so my question was, in the interest of not growing too aggressively in an irresponsible manner, and buying a package of houses like you got from Joe, and then you were surprised to find out there was some pretty bad deferred maintenance on it. Luckily, Mark was positioned well enough to handle that. So my question was, how much should I have? So I'm at 10,000 right now with 8 doors total. And I think I really want to get to probably $25,000 in cash reserves before I got to like 10 properties, because I think, especially if I buy properties that aren't freshly remodeled, and unfortunately, sometimes even when they are freshly remodeled, you still find things that are an issue. So my personal opinion on it is, you need to have cash reserves. I agree with Dom when it comes to the credit card aspect. One of the things I've done is say, well, worst case scenario, again, hopefully Dave Ramsey's not listening. I don't think he is, but worst case scenario, if I ran out of all my money, I could still swipe a credit line for another 30 grand, because I liked Dom's point of you need to take care of your tenant. A lot of people nowadays, there's a political climate of people who hate landlords, hate capitalism, and love to use the slumlord example of, well, landlords don't care about you. They'd let you live in abject poverty if they could. I don't agree with that. Dom doesn't, neither does Mark. So responsibly, I think I'm going to move from 10 grand in reserves to 25 grand at the same time I'm growing, but I don't want to get too many rentals and not get enough. So that's my opinion on it. If I had a follow-up question, I would say that maybe it would be good to expand. I know Mark and Dom, you have more experience in this, to talk about if you're buying turnkey style properties or potentially doing the BRRRR method. So you're going to have properties that ideally don't need as much repairs. Is there a chance where maybe in certain situations you don't need as much repairs versus other situations? Mark, if you want to go first on that.
Sure. Well, one thing, just thinking on everything you were saying, and I mentioned like having that one rehab that was $11,500. Let's say if my cash had been tight and I had a tenant move out and the rehab was going to cost $11,000, but at the same time I had a roof go bad and maybe whatever the third problem was, the rehab I could hold off on. But the roof gone bad has to be fixed ASAP. If it's a plumbing problem, you got to fix it ASAP. So thinking on that, one thing I'm thinking out loud here. you don't always have to have enough cash to pay for total rehabs on your properties. Because number one, you don't have to rehab them every year. Number two, if a rehab does come along, there's no tenant living in it. So if money was tight, you're okay with that. Okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. All right, cool. And I lost my train of thought, Mike. What was your actual question?
The question was, is there a situation where maybe you need more cash reserves versus less? Like if you're buying turnkey properties, freshly remodeled or new homes, can you get away with having a little less versus, all right, that package deal you got from Joe, there was some deferred maintenance on it. You know, maybe you want to front load a little extra reserves for when you walk into a surprise you didn't expect.
Right. I used to think if I was buying turnkey or something freshly rehabbed, I wouldn't need as much in reserves. I've come to find out, I think I need the same amount in reserves no matter what the property is, because I've bought turnkey properties that have been very well renovated and they look good. But then maybe 6 months into it, a year into it, this is a true example, a breaker box burnt up. And that breaker box was like $1,500. And in another place, it was something minor. But even though it's a rehabbed house, it was from a turnkey operator, problems still developed. But the more rentals we get, and I'm curious to get Dom's take on this, there has to come a cap as to how much cash we need in reserves. Because the bigger we get with our portfolios, we'll get to the point where we have more cash flow coming in than what we need to live on. So that cash flow coming in can cover any repairs that come about. And one last thought real quick is your reserves aren't just for repairs. We may or may not have mortgage to pay. So if you have a property vacant for 4 months, that's 4 months of paying the mortgage out of your pocket. Okay. And you still got to pay taxes. You still got to pay insurance. So you always got to account for that when you're thinking about reserves. All right. So what do you think, Dom?
You know what? Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Well, the more properties you have, the more money you're making every month in cash flow. And that should cover any unexpected repairs you may have. And that's where I am right now. So the money that I have in the bank, that's not necessarily for the just in case. Again, with this month, worst case scenario, if I get 10 phone calls for furnaces, I'll be able to handle it with the monthly cash flow I got in January. But again, if you have 1 or 2 or 3 properties or 4 properties, and all 4 of these properties, one there's a roof leak, the other 3 there's a furnace. Yeah, that's where you need that credit card. That's where you need the cash reserves. So again, I'm at the point right now that the money I have in the bank isn't necessarily for reserves because I get a nice spread every month. But I do have money in the bank. There's always, again, just the way I'm wired. The what ifs. I get the what ifs. What if next month I lose 3 tenants? What if it's just I could sleep a little better at night. Yeah. And I will agree, just because you get a turnkey property, sometimes there's always that hidden landmine. Yeah, sometimes there's always a hidden landmine that someone didn't detect. That's happened more times than I can count.
Yeah, I think if the main takeaway there probably that I'm getting, and what I would hope newer or small size real estate investors understand, is don't kid yourself into thinking that just because I bought a brand new or freshly remodeled property that I'm golden. I don't have to worry about repairs. So if you're running your numbers on whether this is a good deal, don't say, oh, I don't need to calculate as much for repairs. It'll be fine, because it probably won't. Based on your guys' stories, there's a good chance something could come up. And number 2, at some point you'll get to an upper limit on the amount of money you need to save, because let's say you get to 25, 30, 40, 50 rentals, the monthly cash flow that you bring in from those rentals can itself cover any repairs. You still should have some in reserves, but continuing to add on to that number isn't necessarily something you have to do, because your monthly cash flow, once you hit 30, 40, 50 rentals, can assist with covering repairs or vacancies and things like that. That's what my takeaway is from what you guys said.
I can't, maybe it was about 4 years ago, the last time where I had to dig into my bank account because I got hit with excessive. So I've been pretty fortunate. It may have been 3 or 4 years ago where I had to dig into my account and go into my bank because the repairs and vacancies exceeded any sort of profit that I had. For 1 month, I made no profit. It's been a while. But it does happen. You have to be prepared. But you just remember that a lot of the repairs that you make are tax deductible. So I mean, there's a little comfy there. There's a little comfort there. But you know what? What's really bothering me now? Some of the cash reserves I have, and maybe this is for another show. The cash reserves we have in a bank. With the 7 or 8% inflation, every month we're losing money. It's like, I mean, we don't see it being debited, but every month we're losing money. So yeah, that bothers me.
Dom, I understand that completely because most of my reserves I keep in Ally Bank, which is paying like 0.5% interest. Inflation's running 6, 7, 8%. That's way more than what the interest is. So, but at the same time, I'm a little bit different than you guys. I am living off my investments basically 100%. Both of you guys each have a paycheck. I do have a pension, but that pension is also used for my normal living expenses. Okay. So if I'm comparing myself to you, both of you, perhaps I want to keep just a little bit more in reserves just because I can't go work overtime if all of a sudden I fall short. Or whatever it may be. But like Dom reiterated, I think, Mike, you'll realize this. Once you get to a certain level and you got some money stashed away that's accessible to you, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a bank. I don't recommend to put it in stocks because the stock market can be so volatile. Don't put it in crypto because that's so volatile. But if you have liquid reserves you can get in case of an emergency, the more rentals you get, you got that cash flow coming in, you're going to be fine. So, and we all three live in different parts of the country. We have rental properties in the same general area, though, for the most part. So I think we all have a fairly good idea of what repairs can cost. So it's up to each of us, everyone watching this, depending on your market, maybe where my houses are in Indiana, a roof costs $5,000. If I own rental property here in Florida, a same kind of shingle roof might cost me $20,000. So you got to look at your market.
Agreed. $25,000 a roof in Seattle as well. So
you told me about Mike. You told me about the repairs in Seattle. Oh my God! I mean, it's insane. Yeah. I put in again. I have a really good furnace guy. He gets some. He does rehab. He works with rehabbers. A lot of these rehabbers want brand new furnaces, so he gets furnaces that are like maybe 3 or 4 years old, and he inspired with installation, and that usually charge me $900 to $1,000 for a next to nothing furnace. So, yeah, I have a line on that.
I like that.
And he does travel into Indiana. Hint, hint. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get his number.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, sounds good. Well, Mike, since this was kind of your topic, is there some aspect of cash reserves we haven't hit on yet, or have we covered it all?
Well, I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, the only other thing that I would have maybe re-highlight for those of you watching out there, at some point, it's going to become tempting for you to move a portion of your cash reserves into some other type of investment because you hate watching it be eaten away by inflation, especially right now when inflation is at all-time highs since like the 1970s. I can only imagine the frustration that brings both Mark and Dom having significantly more getting eaten away than I do. But ultimately, if you don't have liquid cash reserves and you need it, there can be severe penalties. If we're in a market downturn and you put it into an index fund that is downturn, you're going to sell at a loss. If you lock it up in cryptocurrency, and like Mark said, you could potentially have to sell at a loss, which could hurt you. So as tempting as it is, from what I've essentially heard from the two of you, as tempting as is. It's much smarter to just find the highest interest rate yielding savings account you can, which is probably going to be less than 1% if you're lucky. And it's just the cost of doing business. You're going to lose a little bit of the value of that money to inflation, but it's better than taking it in the shorts. So that's my summary on it, guys. I do appreciate this. I like this conversation style. I think we could cover other topics. So hopefully we'll see you guys around.
Well, let me say one more thing here. I've purchased more houses than I can count from investors who ran out of money. And you know what? It's always the same story. You walk in the house, you see these beautiful floors. You go upstairs, the floors, it's all decked out. And you go in the kitchen, it's a disaster. And you find out that they bought it and they overspent here, and they ran out of cash reserves and they had to sell it. Okay, so again, cash reserves, you really need to do the research, how much it's going to cost. And even once you buy the place and then you rent it out, you have to have reserves. You have to have reserves in the wing, and just in case that unexpected disaster occurs.
Yep, sounds good to me. And I'll share one quick story, then we can wrap this up. When I was still living in Virginia, I looked at a potential house to buy as a rental. And I met the real estate agent there, and she told me the house was owned by another investor who ran out of money. And she said, she laughed about it because she said she knew this guy. He bought the house 10 years prior, and she knew him personally. And she told him, you need to save some of your rent checks. Said for 10 years, he was going out partying on the weekends. He was buying new cars. 10 years went by, he lost his job. And he said 2 mortgage payments, he missed them, and they're ready to foreclose upon the house. So he had to sell it. And she was laughing because she's like, 10 years of rents. He could have paid this house off in 10 years, but he just spent all the money. So anyway, I think we'll wrap this up. So real quick here, we can all say goodbye. Thanks so much, Mike, and your final word.
If you're not following Mark's channel, please do. Same thing with Dominic's channel. If you want to actually get advice from experienced real estate investors who are not trying to sell you anything, who will point you in the right direction and answer your questions because they don't have hundreds of thousands of followers and they're too busy, follow their channels. I literally ask them for advice with pretty much everything I do, copy and paste their advice into my life, and it's been pretty successful. So you're missing out if you don't follow these guys.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mike. All right. How about you, Dom?
You guys have said it all. Yeah. We're not trying to sell you anything. Just listen, take advice. You should do very well. They can't add to what you two already said.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you both, gentlemen. And just for the audience, I will put links to both of their channels in the description below. And let's say, for example, next time Dom hosts, or in the following time Mike hosts, I will do a 20-second short saying, look at Millennial Mike's channel, or look at Dominic Kosteris' channel to watch the 3 friends talk about whatever topic it is. So, all right. So Mazske Finance is signing off. Thanks for watching. And gentlemen, thank you for participating.
Adios.